The Carolina Panthers had their best practice of training camp 2024, and I'm here to tell you all about it. Welcome to Move the Change with JJ. If you don't already, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn that bell notification on so you can be notified every time we upload. If you're new to the channel, I'm happy that you're here with us. If you're a returner, thank you so much for being here. Find us at For Panthers Fans Only on Instagram and TikTok. Also, make sure to follow us on X at FPFO_podcast. That is where you can see exclusive videos from training camp, as well as just getting live updates from training camp every single day. I want to jump right into it, man. If you can't tell, my energy is a lot better than it was yesterday, as well as the two previous days. The Carolina Panthers look like a completely different football team. Plays being made left and right, offense and defense. Had a big-time interception by the defense towards the end of practice. Bryce Young absolutely shredded the defense at times. Everything you could have wanted, plus more, in today's session. Dave Canales made a comment about the energy. He said it felt right, and as a fan, as a bystander, as someone who isn't a part of the team but is very heavily invested, I could not agree with him more. Before we get into practice, I always like to go through our transactions as well as injuries, so I'll do that now. The Carolina Panthers waived J.D. Dorenzo, and as a correlating move, they signed Caden Stearns from the Denver Broncos. Little bit of secondary help this past weekend on For Panthers Fans Only. Me and the guys told you all that the secondary still did need a lot of help. And now the Carolina Panthers make a move to kind of add to that depth and also add a piece that has the potential to contribute to the Carolina Panthers on game days. Now, everybody that had a vet day yesterday did return, specifically Adam Thielen. We talked about that offensive line as well. So that was good to see those guys get back into the swing of things. Jadeveon Clowney was held in check today. As you guys know, that so far has been my camp MVP. Between Jadeveon Clowney and Jonathan Mingo, those two guys have absolutely dominated training camp up to this point. But I will say the offensive line did a solid job with Jadeveon Clowney today. He also seemed to be kind of taking limited reps. Now, I will say I'm not 100% sure if that was intentional by the coaching staff or if it was just one of those situations where it seemed like he was taking limited reps and the offensive line just had him hemmed up for the most part. So I'll give credit there. Like I started the video off, the Carolina Panthers today by far had their best practice of 2024 training camp, and really it was led by quarterback Bryce Young. I will get more into detail there. I also have a couple of videos that I'll show you guys just to kind of support that. Today, I'm not going to lie to you all. I've told multiple people. I even tweeted it out. Today was by far the best that I have ever seen Bryce Young perform in the Carolina Panthers uniform, with the exception of the Green Bay Packers game last year, during the only game that the Carolina Panthers eclipsed 30-plus points. Overall, the energy was impeccable from offense, defense, even the special teams period seemed as though it had a little more juice than we had seen in previous days. Now, the pads were fully back on. We talked about on Sunday on For Panthers Fans Only how those pads kind of translate to the energy that is required when you're on the field. However, today, the main difference for the Carolina Panthers was the fact that that energy was reciprocated throughout the duration of practice. From play one all the way to the last play of practice, the Carolina Panthers were high energy. Pads were popping, as you see here with the Jamie Robinson hit. Today was special, and seeing Bryce Young produce the way he did, like I mentioned, if you're familiar with For Panthers Fans Only, if you've seen any of my content, you know that I have been one of the main guys that have had a lot to say negative about Bryce Young and just his position with the Carolina Panthers, what I felt like his ceiling was, his energy, etc. Today, Bryce Young answered all of those questions for me. I do understand that today was only one practice. I understand that we are going up against a defense that has a questionable secondary overall. However, the swag that he played with, the dimes that he was delivering, the playmaking ability on the run when the pocket broke down were all next level for Bryce Young today. Now, on the topic of Bryce Young, it was announced today via Dave Canales that he would not be participating in our first preseason game against the New England Patriots. And I just want to give my opinion on that very, very briefly. I absolutely hate the decision. I know some people are on one side of the fence, other people are on the other. However, I do not like it, especially after what I saw from Bryce Young today. We talk about stack days and how guys have to get their rhythm heading into the regular season. And I think, to be quite frank, this is a severe misstep by Dave Canales and his coaching staff. Bryce Young, we understand what he did last year. It was a struggle. Now you bring in a completely different regime with a completely new system. He has new weapons on the outside, has a couple of new weapons on that offensive line, and I think that it is imperative for your franchise quarterback to get as many reps as possible with that starting unit heading into the regular season, so that the transitional period is not as severe, so that it doesn't take as long for the offense to start gelling, specifically when you're talking about a new system. On top of that, this is one of the things that we'll talk about in our 3 takeaways. There is some question marks still with that offensive line. The offensive line has not produced to the best of their ability, in my opinion, and it's all headed by Austin Corbett, the center. A center in which the Carolina Panthers decided they didn't want to go draft a guy to potentially replace him or to potentially push him to be a better version of himself. We know the question marks that we have with Ikem Ekwonu. We understand that Taylor Moton is the vet of this group, but he also at times has had some mental lapses. He also at times this training camp has struggled in certain blitz packages. And also Damian Lewis, who has been hurt for the better part of camp this year, and Robert Hunt, who are 2 newer guys, once again, in that newer system. I just think it's a bad play for Dave Canales. I think it's a bad decision for Bryce Young. And again, off of what I saw today, it is imperative that you have stack days. So you would allow Bryce Young to take that Wednesday off and then come back on Thursday and see some live bullets. I don't like the decision. Hopefully, prayerfully, it plays out correctly. But off of that, I would not be surprised, and you should not be either, if Dave Canales and his coaching staff decides that Bryce Young will not play for the preseason. Then our only option and only opportunity to see Bryce Young against a team that isn't his pre the regular season would be against the New York Jets when they have joint practice on August 15th. Now we'll jump into our first takeaway. The offensive line must be better. Now, I mentioned just a second ago that we spent big money on Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis. We know 2 of the highest paid offensive linemen in the NFL, specifically Robert Hunt, who took a large part of our salary cap this year. We know the story on Ikem Ekwonu, the question marks that he has coming off of a sophomore slump, one where he admittedly said that he felt as though he had arrived, didn't take practice as serious as he felt he needed to, and again, in a new system. And then you move over to Austin Corbett. Now, I talked about Austin Corbett and his relationship with Bryce yesterday. I kind of mentioned it earlier in this video as well, but this is definitely a problem. I'm going to always give you guys the truth to the best of my ability. Austin Corbett and his relationship with Bryce Young as it pertains to him delivering the snap right now is an issue. With that being the case, we tend to see a lot of these plays that shouldn't break down start to break down, thus making Bryce have to use his legs, have to make off-platform throws, and transparently it's all stemming from the word hut. It is a problem, and ultimately when the timing of the snap is off, the delivery of the snap is off, it makes everything around it break down. So that definitely could play a part on why we've seen a lot of bad reps from the offensive line overall. But I do believe that the offensive line still has a lot of work to do. I've mentioned on multiple occasions that the run game has kind of been ineffective at times. And I'm sure you guys have seen all over X a lot of videos where Bryce Young, had they had pads on, would have been under the blue tent. So it's definitely a problem, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed heading into preseason game number 1. And also, since we're here, and also this definitely could be playing a part in Dave Canales' decision to not play Bryce Young. We know that Andy Dalton is already hurt. The team brought in Jake Luton to be that quarterback 3. Jack Plummer, admittedly from Dave Canales, will be the starting quarterback of the preseason. He will get a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of things that this offensive line must fix, and they must fix it fast if we want Bryce Young and this offense to be the best version of themselves. Our second takeaway of the day is that the receiving group did go to work. The receiving group cooked today. It wasn't just one guy, it was everybody. Had a couple of catches from Jonathan Mingo, had a couple of big catches across the middle from Deontay Johnson. Terrace Marshall got in the end zone a couple of times. The list goes on and on and on. The receivers looked very, very good after we saw a tough day from the offense over the past 2 or 3 practices. I mentioned yesterday that Terrace Marshall Jr. did leave the field after a huge collision with Deshaun Jameson. He was back out at practice today, and to be quite frank, I'm not quite sure what the injury was yesterday, but it had absolutely no impact on Terrace Marshall and his ability to perform today. Again, he'd had a couple of touchdowns. Adam Thielen got significantly involved in the offense as well. And then we know Deontay Johnson, being option number 1, was extremely involved and made some big plays. The wide receiver group looked great today, and I'm happy they were able to get back on track since we are just 48 hours away from our first preseason game against the New England Patriots. And for our third takeaway, obviously you can kind of tell the tonality of this video. I'm sure if you guys follow us on X, you already know what the third takeaway is, and it's going to kind of lead us into the good, the bad, the ugly as well. But Bryce Young looked elite. When I tell you guys, Bryce Young was absolutely abusing and shredding this defense apart. It was like something I had never seen from him before. From playmaking to getting out of the pocket and keeping his eyes downfield and delivering a couple of different strikes, to the comprehension of the playbook, to the ability to get the ball out in a timely manner. Bryce Young looked elite. Bryce Young looked like what we were told he would be, being the number 1 overall pick coming out of Alabama. I've said this on X. I said this in multiple group chats. I said this to multiple individuals. If we get this version of Bryce Young heading into the regular season, the Carolina Panthers will be in good hands. Today, it seemed like there was absolutely no throw he could not make. It seemed like Bryce Young deserved to be of upper echelon quarterbacks within the NFL. Bryce Young today looked elite. If he is able to maintain what he did today, the Carolina Panthers are in good hands, and Bryce Young will be exactly what we believed he would be coming out of Alabama. Now, off of that, it obviously wasn't all good. As you guys saw, I'm sure, Bryce Young did throw his second interception of camp today. However, we're talking about 10 days into camp, and Bryce Young has only thrown 2 interceptions. Now, you can make the argument that that's because Dave Canales and his offense has not opened up, has not allowed Bryce the ability to throw the ball downfield. But I will say, being at camp every day with the exception of FanFest, Bryce Young has done a phenomenal job of protecting the football this training camp particularly. Bryce Young tore the defense up today, and this is what, me personally, I've been waiting to see from him and this offense in particular. And that leads us to the good, the bad, the ugly. The good is Bryce Young and the playbook. Now, I've talked on multiple occasions about the run game. I've spoken on multiple occasions about the playbook and the lack of deep shots that I've seen up to this point in camp. Today, that wasn't an issue. We saw Bryce Young in multiple formations. We saw him show the ability, multiple level passes, whether it be short, medium, or deep. And the creativity of the playbook, to be quite frank, has been solid all throughout camp. We see a lot of misdirections. We see a couple of trick plays. We see Bryce Young under center more, something Frank Reich said that Bryce Young didn't have the ability to do last season when he was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Right now, this offense is set up for success, and it's really just all about the execution and the ability to make things come to fruition. The past 3 days, I have been extremely tough on this offense as well as this team as a whole, because I felt as though this was not the energy that I had been seeing the previous 6 days. Today they made up for it, and my hope in this team was definitely revived. The sins of the past 3 days, to me, have been forgiven. Shout out to Bryce Young and shout out to that offense, because they did come to play today. And the defense definitely deserves an honorable mention as well, because their energy was also through the roof. It was just simply nothing they could do with Bryce Young today. For the bad, there is none today for me. The practice so competitive and played with a sense of urgency that I really could not take any bad from what I saw today. However, you can kind of lump these two things in with each other, because the ugly was the offensive line. Too many times this training camp, I have seen the offensive line have significant breakdowns that in actual games would potentially cost Bryce Young 2 to 3 weeks of his NFL career, if I'm just being 100% honest. So right now, the ugly for today in particular was the offensive line. And if I wanted to go a step further, Austin Corbett, the offensive line must be better. I mentioned earlier, one of the highest paid offensive lines in the NFL. We went out and we got Robert Hunt. We went out and we got Damian Lewis. Those guys cost a pretty penny. And at this point, I am waiting to see the return on investment, because overall, if we look at Kemp, it has not paid off up to this point. Now, I realize I've talked a lot about the front seven and how dominant they've been. But again, I'm kind of torn because I really don't know if that's because the offensive line is so bad or if we just have some studs in that defensive line and linebacker room. However, what I do know for a fact is the fact that the offensive line must be better, because right now, the level of play, specifically today that I saw, is not going to get it done during the regular season. And for our kicking matchup, the part of the video that I know you guys love, Harrison Mevis went 3 or 4 today. Not sure where he missed from, but I will say it was not 50 plus. Harrison Mevis did not miss from 50 plus today. I want to say it was maybe 45, 46 or in. It was his second kick or third kick of the day. But again, it wasn't a far one. It was placed on a hash. I want to say it was placed on the left hash, if I'm not mistaken. And he kind of pulled it. So again, for my Harrison Mevis fans, it's really, really not looking the best for you all. Dave Canales did mention today, however, that it was still a battle. However, I still do have Harrison Mevis trailing Eddie Pinheiro right now. And that could be another conversation for the Carolina Panthers and how our salary cap bowls, because as we know, the reason why Eddie Pinheiro wasn't at OTAs, the reason why Eddie Pinheiro seems to kind of be a little standoffish as it pertains to the organization right now, is because he's looking for a new contract. And with Harrison Butker getting his new 4-year, $25.6 million deal, the kicking market could be wide open, and we could be looking at Eddie Pinheiro potentially being a top 6 or top 7 highest paid kicker in the NFL. That's all I have for today. If you don't already, again, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn the bell notification on. There is no practice for the next 3 days. I will return Saturday on August 10th with a new episode of Move the Chains. I'm considering doing a post-game review of the preseason game against the New England Patriots. So again, make sure to turn that bell notification on so if I do upload, you guys can see it. Also, tomorrow we are releasing a special episode with Aaron Duncan, CEO of Unnecessary Bluntness. We did an episode with him over this past weekend. Gonna release it tomorrow sometime in the evening. So make sure, again, like, comment, subscribe so you guys can stay up to date with all of our content. Thank you all again so much for being here, and we will talk again very, very soon. Peace.